All right, good afternoon, everybody. Event Trader here, and we are joined, of course, by Brandon Mars, options trader, and we're going to have our latest version of the options playbook coming, of course, with the backdrop of a pretty big rally going on in the markets, Brandon. So I'd be remiss if I did not ask you about your thoughts on really price action over the last week or so, as well as today, obviously. So what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, not to point out the obvious, but a pretty big sea of green out there, that's for sure. So things are looking pretty strong. I talked about this briefly in my notes today. Very strong market can sometimes get a little tricky when you're talking on an options perspective, because when you get that big gap up, sometimes you just don't get some further upside that you need for your options. I don't love gaps. Gaps are, done on purpose to maybe frustrate traders and draw them in at certain times. But definitely don't want to be. I'm not looking at my put list a whole lot today. That's for sure.
Out of curiosity, when you do see a big gap up like this, do you tend to start searching around for some puts, just a little bit of downside protection in case we get a reversal, or maybe things that you are of the opinion, this is just ran way too much. This has got to come back to earth. Do you look at things like that, or do you not really worry until you start seeing some cracks in the facade?
For me, just one of my strong points, on a day like this, if we get a fade, I watch your notes in the room and I see when you take trades like that, and you're 10 times better at something like that than I am. On a big green day like this, buying puts real quick it's not my strong point. I might, as I'm searching around, try to find some things that, are maybe weak. Something I was looking at earlier, like United Health Group, UNH, that's been a little weak for a pretty strong day. So, I might maybe kind of throw that onto my radar just in case we start to see some of those cracks. But just for me, when I have so many things on my list that are green, buying puts it's not my strong point, unfortunately.
All right. So, what's your plan of attack then, moving forward, Brandon? Are you just going to kind of wait for some of these things to consolidate a little bit and wait for the options pricing to catch up a little? Do you find that there's an advantage when things move this quickly, in the options pricing, or does it usually price things in uh, immediately, so you don't really get that arbitrage out there?
I mean, definitely would have been an advantage on the pricing if you had, bought some calls at the close yesterday. Again, not to point out the obvious with that idea, but if you got that quick big gap up, that's where the pricing would have really kicked in. And I mean, if you look at some things like, even like a Tesla, or I was looking at Amazon earlier. I mean, if you weren't out of your calls by like 9:40 this morning, your pricing has just kind of deteriorated because it's kind of pulled back or been flat. So, more what I would do, and I guess I'll kind of jump into one of the first things on my watch list, was Spotify. So Spotify is a stock that I've been watching. I've mentioned it a couple times in the room, and I've just been kind of watching it for a breakout over the like the 170 area, and we started to get that, and actually had a little bit of a ascending triangle on the daily chart, and that was a stock that today kind of came back, faded really right off of the open. I take a little caution when I see a big fade like that on a strong day. But then I kind of saw it putting around a base, call it the 171-ish area intraday. And then it had a nice move higher right before the lunch hour, and then a little bit of like a flag-like consolidation during the day. And that was essentially where I threw out the idea to jump into the 175 calls. Saw a little bit of a pullback. You had a stock that wasn't super extended, and then you had an intraday pattern to it. And then at the same time, the markets remain strong. So, after having that pullback, you've kind of got the chance again that the computers are still strong on the buy perspective, and might kind of give Spotify another breakout. And we actually did get that. And then I'd actually just jumped out of it. I might be a little early on that, but some of the volume on the buying just dried up a little bit more than I wanted to see. So rather than push my luck, I got out of it. But this could end up at 175 by the end of this segment, unfortunately. But I guess we'll see.
So would you be out then if it got up to 175? Would you just bank your profits and move on?
Yeah, 175 was kind of my intraday target. Now that it's kind of broken that triangle on the daily basis, I do think that this has more upside potential. It is putting in a hanging man type candle today, so you got to maybe take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. And today too, after 2% up, and I had a nice move on Friday. I don't know, we might be due for a little bit of a breather. So the highs of the day around 175 was my target, and then to kind of reevaluate the situation on that one.
All right. So we'll keep an eye out on your Spotify play. Another one that you had out. It's busy week for the Chinese names. So PDD was one. Used to be Pinduoduo, right? PDD Holdings now.
Yes, Pinduoduo.
So obviously you got a lot of geopolitics going on in the backdrop with Chinese data tonight and the Xi Biden meeting tomorrow. So I'm just kind of curious what you were looking at in PDD that you liked, because there are a number of these Chinese ADRs, I think, that are kind of bustling up and ready to break out potentially. I know Tencent was one name that I was looking at earlier. Baba trying to move above that 82, but Baidu is another one that I was looking at just on those Chinese ADR fronts where it's been trading in a really tight range down here. So curious to see what you were looking at for Pinduoduo for a potential breakout.
Yeah, so PDD, this was one that I got onto my radar last week, and I've just been watching for a breakout around the 110 area. So looking at that on the daily chart, it came up, call it mid-October, and tested the 110 area, had a little bit of a pullback, tested it again at the end of October, and then it's been right around 110 for almost a week now. So it's been kind of building as maybe some of the other China. I would agree with you that some of them are bubbling up, but I think there's still been some weakness there. Like if you look at like Baba from like November 6th to just yesterday, I mean, that was in a little bit of a pullback. We had a stock like PDD that really didn't pull back at all, and it's just been kind of hanging out around that 110 area. So just waiting for the breakout. These Chinese ADRs can sometimes get a little whippy and be a little challenging to deal with, but it just keeps building and building. And then what drew me in today was some big buying came in. They had it was kind of an ugly dip this morning as the rest of the market went higher, and some really big volume stepped in. So even today, I mean, we're actually already almost at the equivalent of the volume from yesterday, and we've still got 2 hours to go. So something's building there. And yeah, like you said, a little bit of a risk with some of the geopolitical stuff, but knowing that risk is out there, I wanted to take a shot because I think if we get any sort of positive news, some of these ADRs could continue that ride that you just mentioned.
All right. We talked PDD, we talked Spotify. Another name that's been on your radar here is Goldman Sachs. So I just wanted to ask what you're looking at there. Obviously, a nice little bust up above the 200-day moving average in Goldman today. Pretty good looking chart, that's for sure. On the daily, it's had a nice run off that 290 level, getting up to about 340 here. So What's that, about a 20% rally over the last week and a half or so. So what is it in Goldman that you're looking at, or has that move kind of, like so many things today, just kind of been disrupted from what you're looking at, and now you're just kind of waiting for things to settle?
Yeah, I think unfortunately got to kind of let that one settle. I mean, that chart is probably going to look nice if it could get a little consolidation around that 340 area for a couple days, just a little digestion. I think it could resume higher. But what caught my attention was on the daily chart. We had 6 straight inside days. So it was just kind of building from that mother bar that occurred on November 3rd. And, it just seemed like when we had that next strong day or the financials saw some strength, we would see the breakout. And we clearly saw the breakout today. I mean, 4% for Goldman in a day is a pretty strong
Yeah.
move. I've talked about this before. I tend to shy away from trading options in the first 30 minutes just because there's so many things that can move, and it's great money to be made, and also can get burnt pretty bad. On certain days like today, I should probably just put that aside and just say, you know what, the futures are strong, CPI is out of the way, and looking at a setup like Goldman that's kind of been wound up for 6 days, that's probably one of those times that I should just jump on it in the first 5 minutes. Because, if you had done that, you would have, I was looking right before the call. I mean, you would have made like a 6x return, I think it was, on the 340 calls if you jumped in right away. So it would have been a great trade. Again, just, part of my trading with not doing much in the first 30 minutes sometimes comes back to bite me. But, that is what it is. It's just part of your trading plan.
Yeah, especially when the first 30 minutes looks like today's first 30 minutes, right? Where things are just running out the door. Seemed like there's a lot of people um, with a little bit of FOMO trying to play some catch up on this one. A lot of people positioned on the short side. So let's talk then, Brandon, on a day like today. Um, what does your day look like in the after hours when you're going back and looking at all the price action? What are you looking for on the option side that you'll be looking for opportunities tomorrow? Are you looking for calls and names that hadn't moved? Are you looking for puts and names that might have rallied a little too much on this and look like a bear market bounce? What's your game plan on that?
Yeah, so in a time like this, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit in my notes here and there over the last, call it 2 weeks. I'm not looking at a ton of puts. I'll usually throw some ideas out there just to have them in my back pocket. But, I just tend to be a better trader when I'm in one direction. So, when the market gets smoked, I'll talk to family, over a family dinner or something. They'll be like, oh, geez, the market's been terrible for the last 3 weeks. It must be awful for you. I'm like, well, actually, those times feel a little easier to me because you just kind of focus on puts. And, right now, I'm probably just focused a little bit more on calls. And, I'll have some put ideas in my back pocket just in case, I don't know, all of a sudden the Biden G meeting tomorrow just goes really, really south. And, all of a sudden you've got all these longs trapped. But for me, I'll try to find things that aren't super extended. So, you start to get to points where, again, it doesn't mean it's an automatic sell, but you start to get things that start bumping up against those upper Bollinger Bands and just get a little too extended, maybe a little too far away from the 20-day moving average. Or I'll look at something like, I talked about this one in my notes this morning too. This is starting to bump up against its Bollinger Band and is approaching the 50-day. But Tesla, Tesla has a gap to fill from October 18th. So it's still, let's see here, from its current price, we're still looking at about 6 points away from filling that gap. And it's also got the 50-day near it. So we're kind of up around that 240 level. So it's kind of got a couple of things that are still going to kind of draw that price potentially upward, like a magnet. So something like that I might be interested in. I mean, again, if you got that big gap up kind of hanging man type candle forming today. So I'm cautious of that, but there's still some technical things that would kind of draw me towards that. And then I just tend to try to shy away from the things that have gotten way over their skis and way above the upper Bollinger Band.
All right, that makes sense. So we'll keep an eye out on that. Out of curiosity, are there any particular uh, instruments that you're watching to change you from a call buyer to a put buyer? Like, do you
Um,
follow the VIX? Like, if the VIX is over 20, or do you do anything along those lines?
yeah, I mean, for me, it's mainly focused around the chart. Sometimes when the VIX reaches those extreme levels, you and the other traders on the team are usually pretty good at pointing that out. That's when those things catch my attention mainly. For right now, with the seasonality and you've got kind of maybe ramping up for this December into the Santa Claus rally and things looking really, really strong. I'd look for maybe some sort of big type of reversal candle, some sort of like blow off top in the indexes would maybe catch my attention. But still though, if things are really, really strong and they don't turn super red on one day, I would still prefer to try to seek out some of those names that might be a call candidate and trade those during the day. And, again, I would shy away from those and switch over if all of a sudden the indexes were all down 3%. It doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to be in calls those days, but yeah, maybe some sort of blow off top in the indexes, or a shift in my watch list. I mean, I got 200 things on my watch list today, and I think there's 5 of them that are in the red. So, until we get a little shift there, the calls seem to be the way to go.
All right, real quick question for you, Brandon, from the audience. Do you try to figure out the price of a given stock might be pinned to a Friday options expiration? If so, is there a web tool you use?
So I don't look at that too much. I mean, in a lot of certain cases, I mean, you can kind of make somewhat of an educated guess as you start to get closer and closer to the expiration date of where the stock is trading. So I just use kind of some of that. I don't know, maybe going back to Tesla, you've got the 50-day moving average that's right around the 240 area. You kind of got that nice round, number that ends in a zero that tends to draw in the options activity. So, I maybe start to think about little things like that, and then really just monitoring it through the week. So, the pinning tends to occur on the most heavily traded options strikes. So, as you get closer and closer, you can start to see that happen. And I want to pretend that like I had some huge crystal ball, but looking at the Tesla strikes right now, the 240 call, 150,000 contracts traded today on the 240 call is the most heavily traded contract of the day. And then it's got some pretty high open interest. It's not the highest, but it is higher than most. So again, just usually finding some of those round numbers and then just observing the options chain through the week.
Okay. Well, while we're talking about the options chain, let's talk a little bit about what this week's topic's going to be, Brandon. And that is the use of AI in options trading. And, just kind of, do you use it, and how you see it impacting things out there? So I know you don't use it a ton, but you did do a bunch of research out there, and you found a few interesting items that we're going to talk about. So why don't we break into that a little bit there, and what's some of the basic things that you noticed in your travels?
Yeah. So Again, I'll kind of just reiterate what you just said, just to put my asterisk on this potential or particular conversation. I don't use any sort of AI in my trading. This was a question that was posed to us a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, I just kind of got curious on it and probably timely, so I went out and did some of the research. So I haven't used some of these AI tools. There's a few different websites that popped up. I didn't run any sort of demos or anything like that. So I just want to kind of preface that. So, and another thing that I want to preface is, if an options trade came in via AI, I wouldn't really be able to tell. I suppose if you went out there and you started digging around, you could probably find out. But looking at the options chain right now, the Tesla 240 strike that I just mentioned, just in the time that we've been talking, there's been 2,000 more contracts traded. I'm just seeing the volume. You can find out what exchanges are coming in on. But I kind of had to actually take a step back and ask myself during this process of, would I really even care if it came in from AI? And my overall thought on that was, I don't really think that I would. If I'm looking at an options chain, I'm looking at the bid ask. Do we have a huge bid ask because some of the securities that I trade tend to get a little wider? Is there going to be enough liquidity on this for me to get out of the position? If a stock like Tesla usually trades 1 million plus options a day, if all of a sudden it only trades 200,000, is there something going on? I'm looking for things like that. And if all of a sudden some AI options bot put out some alert and all of a sudden this volume all came in, I don't know if I necessarily care that it came from AI. I think I'd more just care that the actual volume was coming into it. I might like the fact that an AI bot was out there and that all of a sudden there might be some other ones triggering the same buy, and then maybe you get a huge rush of call buying and create some sort of gamma squeeze or something like that. But overall, I'm really just looking for the overall activity and not necessarily where it came from. So with that said, on just kind of how I think about it, I'll just kind of jump in here on the. Excuse me if I take a minute here or
Are you
there.
okay?
This was an interesting topic for me because a lot of these things I kind of just talk off the top of my head, but the whole AI thing was a bit different for me, so I had to get a little bit more granular on my notes for this one. So, one thing that I found was that a lot of websites mainly seemed like they just used AI to create algos and alerts, and they weren't necessarily for options. So it seemed like the tools that these companies were presenting, were to, in quotations, a lot of them were, make more informed investments and trades. And it wasn't very specific to options per se. And there were a lot of websites that I found that talked like they catered towards options traders, but when I drilled down, it was 99% focused on the particular stocks. And they go hand in hand. If you get a good alert on a stock, you can usually apply that to a good trade via an option, but not in all cases, just because some stocks don't trade a ton of options. So it seemed very interested that a lot of companies were talking about how they were, great on the options front, but in reality, I think they were just giving stock ideas. So, on the options front specifically, what it really seemed to focus on a lot was taking all of the data and analyzing it in a way that they would pick the correct strike for you. That was kind of the main thing that I saw. Um, so, they said, hey, we'll take this volume, this open interest, and we'll pick the ideal strike for you. So again, I didn't test any of these. They could be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, all right, if I'm a computer, I'm probably going to look at the volume. I'm going to look at the open interest and see where the flows are going. And kind of my assumption was all of a sudden that this AI tool was going to spit back at me, okay, you should buy the Tesla 240 call. And I'm like, okay, well, are you just, picking the most heavily traded and your computers are just being drawn to that? So that was kind of what I picked up on that. And again, I should probably run a demo to confirm it, but I didn't see exactly how they didn't give specifics on exactly just how great they were. It was all a lot of boilerplate language of
A little.
just.
Do you think that they're just a little bit too rules based, that it's not really necessarily providing you advantage as much as it's just kind of pushing everybody in the same direction?
I think it's a little bit of that. I think it's also a sexy marketing tool, if you will, right now.
Right.
um, so I think the whole AI thing probably still has a long way to go. I do think that there's going to be a lot of benefits, and I think that people that use AI properly in the trading world are probably going to come up with some pretty awesome tools. Me personally, if I came up with one, I'd probably be on an island, sipping a margarita versus sharing it with others. That's just me. so, um, but yeah, no, I think it was just kind of the path of least resistance is you could kind of just say, hey, we're going to take all of this data. We've got these great, proprietary AI tools. We're not going to share with you how we do it, but, we're just going to push everybody to the same strike price. And I think it's easy enough at the end of the day, if it didn't work out for you, that you could say, oh, well, that 240 call on Tesla, that looked like they were where they were going to pin it. And, that was where every trader was going that week. So, we were wrong along with everybody else kind of thing.
Right. Now, I mean, there's got to be other higher end folks like Citadel and the like, right? That are using this and training it in volume. But again, to your original point, you would just see volume as volume. It wouldn't really matter too much to you if it was an AI or a human.
Yeah, not really. I mean, unless it was some sort of AI that was going to trigger other AI, and like, let's just say all of a sudden it was like all these AI bots came kicking in, and all of a sudden that 240 strike on Tesla, went from 150,000 contracts traded to 300,000 in like a minute. Well, now all of a sudden that's interesting. So if it came in that regard, but other than that, yeah, it would really just be kind of the volume and the activity that would intrigue me. And yeah, I think some of those firms like the Citadels and the market makers, they're all going to have their AI and they've got their algos already, and they're not dumb traders. They know what they're doing and they know how to work these trading systems. And I think some of those guys are probably going to implement AI in a way that could maybe eliminate some trading jobs at their companies, and I think will make them even more savvy as they they bring options to the masses. So probably make them even more dangerous.
Yeah, I was going to say probably lead to a lot more head scratching moves in the broader market, right? When you're trying to figure out, okay, who on earth would be buying this right here, right? Extending it either higher or taking it down lower when most humans wouldn't rationally act in such a manner. That's kind of where I see AI and the algos really impacting things, where they're just kind of playing their games, and you just are sitting there just looking back and be like, who would be chasing this thing up 5%, right? That's kind of how I see it. Um,
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that has a possibility to add one other aspect is I think it has the opportunity to create even more use of derivatives by your average investor, and kind of create some more of those bigger shifts in bigger rug pulls and bigger spikes. Because yeah, like you said, it's like, who in their right mind is going to chase this particular stock at this level? Well, if we're following AI and it's the thing to do, all of a sudden you could have a particular stock that just trades options through the roof, and all of a sudden, whoever wrote those options, you've got, trillions of millions, billions, whatever number it is of options that are in the money that all of a sudden need to be balanced out risk-wise in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, it could lead to some wild rides. And I mean, I think we all know, I think we have enough of those as it is. So, we'll see.
Did you, out of curiosity, did you sign up for any of the alerts? Was
I
there any sites that you're like, oh, this looks pretty good, I'm going to jump in on it?
I did not, for the time being, researching this particular project. Again, I've kind of mentioned that I can read charts, but turning on a computer and getting along with AI are not my strong points. So this little rabbit hole that I went down of playing on all the websites took up quite a bit of time as it is. So I figured we'd have the preliminary conversation, and then I could try to go and do that, and maybe we can have a further conversation as this evolves.
Has there been any sort of tells that you could be like, oh, this must be AI? Like, for instance, if I'm reading a news story and I see each paragraph starting with therefore or however, or some sort of phrase like that, I usually peg that as being written by AI, and I've started noticing it more and more. I would just be curious if there's anything that you kind of see that you're like, ah, that seems like something perhaps an AI is involved in.
I don't know if I'm savvy enough to pick up on that
No,
quite
that's
yet.
fine. That's fine. No, I mean it's everybody's learning that at this point, right? I mean, but I was just kind of curious, playing around with AI and Chat GPT 4.0. That's the one thing that I've noticed a lot with these articles being written by AI companies, is that sort of terminology. So I was just kind of curious if there was a common theme that you had noticed going on with the AI plays that you were looking at.
No, I didn't. And now I'm probably going to read every article every day differently, trying to figure it out. I
Well, I mean, pretty soon every article every day is going to probably be AI, right? So,
This is true.
um, it's definitely something that you want to keep on top of, I would say. Um, so yeah, so it'll be something that we'll continue to track and follow. I know a few of our subs are pretty heavily involved in this, and we'll be chatting with them a little bit as well. Just looking for any sort of advantage that we could provide to the trading community out there. Um, anything else, Brandon, that we didn't touch upon that you wanted to note on this topic?
Yeah, actually, I still got a few notes to go here.
Yeah. By all means.
We were just talking about strike prices, and probably, I guess, the most interesting thing that I found, and I did a lot of Google searches with a lot of different keywords, and there was a surprisingly low amount of articles that I found about options in AI. A lot of them had to do with just regular stock trading. But specific to options, one of the more interesting things I found was Nasdaq. So Nasdaq has this program called the Nasdaq Strike Price Optimization Program. So this was just approved by the SEC, and the press release is actually just from September. So again, we're kind of in the infancy here of what AI is going to do. And directly from the press release, it says it was the first exchange-powered order type that was approved by the SEC. So this next line is a quote directly from the press release. The initiative was designed to improve overall efficiency and provide strike lists more aligned to market and client demand across all 6 of Nasdaq's U.S. options exchanges. So yeah, I mentioned there were a lot of websites that claim they could go out and pick the best strike, but it seems like these AI tools, at least on the NASDAQ front, are going to start to dictate a little bit more which strike prices they put out. So if you remember any of the, I'm sure we all remember them, some of the meme stocks, the Reddit stocks, whatever you want to call them over the last couple of years that, jumped up from, 10 to 100 overnight kind of thing. What you'd start to see is all of a sudden you'd pull up the options chain, one morning, and you'd see all this volume on these new strikes, but you'd see no open interest. And what that meant was they created it, basically just that morning or that night, and it's really the first day of trading. So, in certain cases like that, I think it will help to start to select some of the strikes. I don't know, maybe in time, maybe some of them get eliminated. There are some stocks, I think Apple is one off the top of my head that has a strike at basically every point. Maybe that gets streamlined in time. I think that's to be determined because it's pretty new, but that seemed to be kind of one of the first powerful tools that I saw out there that's popping up AI wise.
All right. What else you got for us there then, Brandon, on this topic?
Yeah. So, again, just, AI is supposed to kind of make things a little more streamlined for us, right? A little easier. So, one thing that I saw was I saw one company that, they were basically offering signals, but all of their signals, they claim to be for options, but they were really, if you drill down to their language, again, they were talking about stocks. And what you'd have to do after that is you'd actually have to go to these 3 platforms that they were connected with, none of which I've ever heard of, whatsoever. I mean, these seem to be very new options brokers. I don't know how great they are, but I've never seen their names in any article or any mention ever. You'd still have to then put in your trade manually. So, kind of what it felt like, it almost felt like, hey, Gavin, I'm going to text you like, hey, I just saw some stock move over the 20-day average, go buy the 100 call. And then you got to run back to your computer and you got to type it in and put in the trade yourself, which, yeah, hey, if I gave you the correct alert, then that would be great. But it just didn't really seem all that streamlined at the moment.
Where are they getting from their signals from? Is it just basic technical trading 101 or?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the common theme on all of the websites is they all kind of had sort of the same language of, our cutting edge AI tools analyze the data from this, and the hundreds of points. And then we, spit out the best, trade ideas. And they all, again, just seem to be focused on the stock. And then you'd kind of have to figure out the options side as well. But yeah, just kind of taking the typical data out there and just analyzing it all and spitting out a trade result. So again, I think time will tell as to how great some of these tools are. And yeah, I think like anything, you'll get all these companies that are putting out their so-called best AI ideas, and you'll have some that will completely flop, and you'll find some tools out there that will probably become, pretty awesome, and they'll grow, and they'll probably be quite successful for people.
All right. So just keeping an eye out here on the markets too while we're chatting along. Nasdaq has pulled back in about 45 points or so from around its highs. S&P coming in for looks like it's getting ready for a test of that 4,500 level. So just watching this market action as we chat along here, Brandon. Okay, what's up next on this?
Yeah. One other thing, again, I just kind of a warning to maybe not get sucked into some of these was I watched a demo video on one of the websites, and it talked about how they had all these great AI tools to help you, pick strikes and profit loss calculator. And I watched the video, and it sure looks exactly like the calculator that I've used with Fidelity for the last 10 years. I mean, it was put in a strike price, and it was, if the stock goes to XYZ price, your profits are going to be this and your losses are going to be this. So again, it just didn't seem like anything that we didn't already have access to at this time. And then another thing that I saw, and no surprises here, was most of these websites happen to just tout how great their returns were. And, I saw one that just said like recommended Tesla, calls at 50 cents, sold at $3. I mean, there was no date, there was no
Right, right.
strike.
It's like
There,
Lenny Dykstra's out there making stock picks again, right?
yeah, nice. So it was like, it was basically like me putting on my website, oh yeah, I picked a call the other day that I bought it at $1 and sold it for 100. I hit 100x. It would just absolutely like no proof, no timing, none of that. So I guess kind of my overall common theme is just very much again in its infancy stages, and I would just maybe be a little cautious of what is out there right now, and kind of getting drawn in by some of the cute bells and whistles that some of these firms put on their websites.
How do the quality of the websites seem to you overall? I mean, are you coming across a lot of like low quality names that people are just throwing stuff out there? It seems like.
I would say part of the reason that I held off on a demo for now is I have about zero interest in wasting my time or providing them with my personal information to get the demo, if that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, that pretty much sums it up, right?
Yeah. So, some of them, eh, there were a couple. It was like, we're specifically for options. And you literally look at their website after, and there was like zero mention of options. I mean, it was all about the stocks and how much data they analyze. And it was like, they didn't even talk about, calls or puts or anything on the website. It's like, well, I don't know. I might not be a marketing genius, but if I was going to put out an options trading website, I personally would maybe mention a section on options. I don't know. That's just me.
No, that wouldn't make any sense, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, it seemed, it seemed like it seemed like a lot of the trade services that popped up right around the time of COVID. And, you had these gurus, so-called gurus, that were putting on the YouTube video talking about how they've hit 100% of their trades. And I think we all know as traders, you don't hit 100% of your trades. It doesn't happen. The greatest Wall Street minds have lost on a trade. It happens. So it really kind of felt like that. There was one group I saw that claimed that they had like an 89% hit ratio. And, again, I kind of put it out there in my mind. I'm like, if you're really hitting 89%, you're probably not sharing your algorithm in your AI. You're probably keeping that to yourself, and you're retiring early. So, yeah, just be cautious with it. Again, it's in the infancy. I think that a lot of cool things will come about from this, and I do think that it will open up the world of options to even more people in time. I didn't see any evidence or any articles of that at this time. Maybe I put in the wrong keywords when I did my search, but I tried a whole bunch of different things, and I didn't see anything pointing to that at this time.
All right. All right, Brandon. Anything else on this topic then before we let you get going here?
No, I think that's about it. I will probably continue to go down the rabbit hole a few of these nights, and if I can find any sort of better concrete ideas or things that are really sticking out to me, or implement them in my own trading, I will definitely give people a heads up. But I think for the time being, just kind of keep an eye on it and see where it goes.
Yeah, and for anybody in the audience out there that has maybe come across anything that's interesting, definitely send it into our feedback, and I'll be sure to pass it along to Brandon here. So, it always helps having a number of different eyeballs out there in case there's something that other people have seen on this topic. But something that I'm sure we'll be continuing to talk about in the coming years, Brandon, because it certainly isn't going away, right?
Yeah,
Unless
absolutely. And
regulators take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for throwing that out there because yeah, I did a ton of searches. I was very surprised by kind of the lack of information out there at this time. So if I completely overlooked anything and anyone has anything to share, I'd definitely be very interested in reading that.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Brandon, for your time. Always very much appreciated here.
All right, thank you, Gavin. Appreciate it.
Okay. We're just going to be shutting down audio for a moment here, and I'll have it back up in a second. Just watching the markets real quick. Nasdaq trying to find some support around that 15,850 level at the moment. Chart trader is short that. He's got a nice trade going on that front. S&P just kind of hovering above that 4,500 level, obviously setting up as a natural nice psychological support level there on it. But definitely getting a little bit of afternoon selling action following a pretty big run. Most likely some profit taking as we go into the final 2 hours of trade here.